We're nearing the conclusion of tonight's celebration of hope, but we want to introduce you to one more person who's having a tremendous impact on the fight against pancreatic cancer and is waging his own battle against the disease. Stan Viticus was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in late 2007. Since then, he's not only bravely fought against the disease, he's also raised a significant amount of money for the Sina Magowitz Foundation's work to fund research into curing the disease. Stan is here with us tonight to tell his story. Welcome, Stan.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. It's my pleasure to be a part of it.
Stan, tell us about your diagnosis and treatment.
Yeah, thank you. You know, looking back on it now, it's easier to talk about. I really got lucky. I mean, it was very disheartening and disturbing at first, of course, to be diagnosed with pancreas cancer, but I was very fortunate, very lucky, just through an annual physical and some blood work and a very diligent primary care physician and my sister, who's a nurse, suggesting to have my enzymes checked, which happened to be spiked, which led to a CT, which led to an early diagnosis of a tumor. I then had a Whipple surgery to remove the tumor successfully. I went through chemo and radiation. I did have to have another Whipple 5 years later due to some scar tissue and so forth. But you know, looking back on it now, it was, I'll say it was a walk in the park. So I am very thankful every day to be here. I was very, very lucky.
You not only fought the disease personally, you're helping raise money to fight it. What has motivated you to take the extra steps you've taken to fund research?
Yeah, you know, I'm kind of an analytical, logical person, so I started reading up on the disease quite a bit, and I soon discovered the Pancreatic Cancer Action Network, PanCAN, which is a wonderful organization that does research and advocacy and so forth for the disease. And I volunteered for them for a number of years, went to Washington, D.C. to march on Congress to help raise funds. And it was very fulfilling, and I learned a lot in that role. And then, because I live in Phoenix, I had heard about a Sina Magowitz Foundation golf tournament in Scottsdale. So I got together some friends. I'm a golfer. I think we pulled together 3 foursomes, made a nice donation. It was a great event, great turnout. That's where I met Roger. And I also, on that occasion, listened to Dr. Von Hoff speak. And I think that was kind of like the aha moment for me. I mean, when you're in the presence of someone like that, who you know is so brilliant and has been around such a long time and has such an impressive track record as an oncologist and researcher. And I looked up the fact that he led the Pancreas Cancer Dream Team that received the largest grant from the Stand Up to Cancer National Telethon that went on in 2010. I mean, all across the country, $105 million was raised. And of course, every research foundation was out there asking for that money, right, to do research and use some of that 105 million. Well, the largest grant went to the Pancreas Cancer Dream Team led by Dr. Von Hoff. So that's when I knew that here's where I needed to dedicate my resources.
And what have you done this year for the Celebration of Hope event?
Yeah, so this is about the 7th year I've done fundraising for the foundation, and I set a goal this year of 50,000, which was aggressive. I didn't know if I could achieve that, but I was able to raise 50,000 this year, which put me over $250,000 now in 5 years. And I have to say, it is really fulfilling, and it feels good to be able to contribute money to such a worthy cause. And, you know, I had 90 donors this year, many of them repeat. And the other thing is I got about $20,000 in corporate matching funds this year. And that's something I've really learned over the years, is that you've got to strive for corporate matching, because that's really free money. And so Intel Corporation, Microsoft, LinkedIn, Texas Instruments, Amgen are all companies that provide matching donations. So that has really helped in this fundraising journey quite a bit.
Why do you feel it's so important to fund pancreatic cancer research?
Yeah, I think when I was with PanCAN and then working with TGen, I think 2 things. I've really gained 2 primary lessons during this journey, aside from learning way more about pancreas cancer than I ever wanted to. One is that cures follow money. There are so many examples in our history of how this worked, where money was raised for the March of Dimes campaign to eradicate polio, 1 dime at a time. I think $17 million was raised back in the 1940s to eradicate polio and come up with a vaccine. Similarly, Danny Thomas started the St. Jude's Children Foundation in the late 50s or 60s because childhood cancer, leukemia, had a 4% survival rate. He found that unacceptable and he said, we got to change that. So he started raising money $1 at a time. Now that survival rate is 97%. And then the HIV epidemic in late 80s, that was a very terrible disease, but the federal government threw so much money at research, and now it's a largely chronic disease. Breast cancer has a 91% 5-year survival rate now because of all the fundraising by the government, Susan G. Komen Foundation. And now today, the coronavirus, we thought it might take at least 18 months. Historically, it's taken 5 to 10 years to come up with a nationwide vaccine. Here we are, 8 months into it, and we've got 2 companies ready for authorization of a vaccine. It's amazing. Why? Because of money. I mean, all of these efforts were painstaking, and they took years, and they took thousands of hours of dedicated researchers and scientists, and many failed clinical trials and tragic deaths. But the one thing they had in common was money. Money is what drives cures and progress, and we've got to raise more money to make this happen for pancreas cancer.
Stan, in closing, how can we help?
Yes, this year, I think my main ask is for people to start a campaign fundraising effort. I mean, that's what I've been doing now for years. And the other lesson, I guess, that I wanted to share in addition to cures follow money is that one of the most difficult parts is to get over that reluctance or that fear of asking people for money. I mean, that's where it all revolves around. I mean, Roger is an incredibly dedicated man, but he's one man. He can't do this alone. I can't do it alone, but I have 90 donors now helping. If we could get 100 people doing what I do, it would be enormous. I'll just give you an example of a good friend of mine who I hadn't seen in 5 years. He sent me a note on LinkedIn congratulating me on my 6 years at ASU. I teach at ASU, and I thought, gee, that's nice to hear from Matt. We exchanged a couple of emails, and I said, I think I'll add Matt to my fundraising campaign. And 3 days later, Matt donates $1,000, and he says, my corporation, Xilinx, matches it. And so here I got $2,000 from sending an email. And, I thought to myself, why was Matt so generous? Maybe it's just because he's got a great job now, he's making good money, and he wanted to help. Maybe he has a friend or a family member that's battling cancer, and Matt just felt like this was his way to help them out. Or maybe he remembers 10 or 12 years ago when he and I were good friends, thinking that, I'm not sure if Stan's going to survive. And now he's happy for me that I did. All I know for certain is that Matt wouldn't have donated if I hadn't asked. I've got countless stories like that of people who've come through with significant donations because I asked them. That's the thing we have to get over, is don't be afraid to ask. This is an enormously worthy cause. With TGen and Dr. Von Hoff backing it, people want to give money to causes like this. They just have to be asked.
Stan, thank you for being here with us tonight.
One thing I do want to add in closing is that my ask to all of you is this: please help us, okay? I mean, next year, start a pledge campaign yourself. Denise Sherman, one of our very dedicated supporters, started this last August or so. I think she raised about $3,000 the first year. This year she raised $10,000, and her husband's company is matching that. So she went from 0 to 20,000 in 16 months by starting this campaign. So all of you next year, if you could sign up, I'll help you with the letter. Liz will get you a donation link that makes it as easy as the click of a mouse to get donations. And then you can help. And maybe eventually we'll have 100 people doing what I do. That will move the needle. And ultimately, some years from now, we're going to have an early detection technique for pancreas cancer through all this research. And one of these days, the survival rate is going to get to 60 or 70%. And I want to be able to say I was a part of that. So please, I hope you will too, because that's why we do this. Thank you.